So this morning I talked about how if you set up your campaigns to work with human nature rather than against it, they would always be more effective. Now, that's a bit of a big claim, and some of you might have been a little skeptical. So I thought rather than me starting this session with some more academic studies and asking you to take them on trust and faith alone, I thought perhaps we could just start with a quick live experiment, because I want to show to you that these behavioural biases, these psychological experiments, aren't just figments of my imagination. They are genuine insights into human nature. So what I'd like you to do is put your pens and paper down for a second. No cheating. I am going to read out a list of 10 two-word phrases, and I want you to concentrate as hard as possible, and then later on we're going to see what people can remember. Okay? So here is the list. 1 second. Okay, here we go. Square door, impossible amount, rusty engine, better excuse, flaming forest, apparent fact, muscular gentleman, common fate, white horse, subtle fault. That is the full list. Now, if you've got paper and pen in front of you, try and write down as many of those as you can. If you haven't got paper and pen, get your phone out and maybe stick it into the notes function. And I will give you a minute to do that, and then we'll come back together. Don't worry too much if you can't remember many of the words. This experiment was first done in 1972 by a brilliant Canadian psychologist called Ian Begg, and he found that on average people remembered 23% of the words, and he did his study in people who were speaking their first language. So if you can remember 2 out of 10, you're doing perfectly well. Okay, another 30 seconds and then we'll compare notes. Okay, is anyone still writing? Okay, I think everyone might have finished writing, but might not need a whole minute. Okay, in that case, let's come back together. And can I ask for a volunteer? Who would happily read out their list of words? Ah, fantastic. In the grey jacket. Oh, before you start, though, everyone else, think about what you've written down. Think about what the volunteers read out. And then the next question is going to be, what types of words are we remembering regularly? And what types of words are we struggling to remember? So over to you.
Testing. Ooh. Subtle fault.
Subtle fault.
Introspective. Muscular gentleman.
Muscular gentleman.
Square door.
Square door.
Apparent fact.
Apparent fact.
Rusted engine.
Rusty engine.
Impossible amount.
Impossible amount.
And white horse.
And white horse. Okay, excellent. So that's the first one. 7, that's very impressive. So the average is 2, so you've done particularly well. Anyone else, you're going to put everyone off volunteering now though. Anyone else happy to volunteer? Who would read out their list? We're going to need a couple more. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Was there a flaming fire or flaming forest?
Flaming forest, yep.
Flaming forest,
But read the full list out, so where you've got
my
overlap.
list is really embarrassing. So I have flaming fire, I got that wrong. I have subtle encounter, which I think I also have wrong.
Which one was that, sorry? Second?
Subtle encounter, I have that wrong, right?
That one may be wrong.
And I have something fact, so that's my whole list.
Okay, that's still absolutely fine.
That's my whole list.
And then let's have a couple more. So who else? We've got someone at the front. Brilliant. Oh. 3.5.
Square door.
Square door, that's a second square door.
It's an excuse, but I can't remember which excuse.
I'll give you half for that. Yeah, there was an excuse. Tough
White
marker.
horse.
White horse again, that's a second white horse.
And the muscular man, but apparently it was gentleman, so I don't know.
Muscular
3/4.
gentleman. Yeah, so we've had muscular gentleman twice, white horse twice, square door twice. Fantastic, thank you. And was there another hat just behind you? I think if you pass it to the guy in the blue-grey jacket. Thank you for that.
Yes, so I've got the square door,
Square door for the third time.
rusty engine,
Rusty ending twice.
impossible amount,
Impossible amount now twice.
white horse,
White horse 3 times.
muscular man.
Muscular man. Okay. So at the moment, we've had 3 square doors, 3 muscular gentlemen, 3 white horses, and we haven't had a common fate, and we only had half of better excuse. Can anyone see yet what's uniting those words that we had 3 times? Oh, God. So let's hold for that for a second. Yeah, absolutely right. So how I've done this study is a little different from the original study. So when Ian Begg did his study in 1972 at the University of Western Ontario, he did it with individuals. So for you, I might read out the list starting with square door, but when I did it to one of your colleagues, I'd start with a different word. I'd randomise them. So you're absolutely right. The way I did it, people tend to remember the first word and the last word. So that's known as the serial position effect.
Plus
And
what we can visualize.
plus what we can visualize. Absolutely. So that's the second factor. Absolutely. So let me show you the full list of words. As I say, this was done over 50 years ago. Very similar approach to what we've done. But Begg read out 20 two-word phrases, and half of the words that he read out were what he called concrete phrases. So that's something like a square door or a rusty engine. A tangible thing that you can visualize. The other half of the words that he read out were what he called abstract phrases. So these are intangibles like subtle faults or better excuse, things that we can't visualize. And what Begg found was that on average people remembered 9% of the abstractions, but 36% of the concrete phrases. So people are 4 times more likely to remember the concrete over the abstract. Now, the reason for that, according to Begg, is that vision is the most powerful of our senses. So when I read things out to you, if I use language you can visualize in your mind, it is very memorable, it's very sticky. But if I use abstractions you cannot picture, it's very forgettable. The reason I wanted to go through that study was twofold. So firstly, I just wanted a simple demonstration of the validity, the robustness of this field. Now, you were influenced just like those participants 50 years ago. So if I quickly add up the numbers, I think you remembered 5 of the abstract phrases and 12 of the concrete phrases. So you were 2.5 times more likely to remember the concrete than the abstract, just like those participants 50 years ago. Now, these are genuine insights into human nature at your disposal. But the second reason I chose that very specific study was I think it's really representative of behavioural science. Now, when you first hear about these studies, they look interesting, but a little irrelevant. They look like academic party tricks. But actually, if you think about the study for just a minute or two, and you think about the core insight, not the peripheral detail, you start to see these studies are deeply relevant to marketing. Now, think about your category. How do most of your competitors communicate? They probably talk about being value for money, or trustworthy, or premium, or high quality. Now, it's not that the audience can't understand those terms. Of course they can. But they will struggle to remember them. What a good communicator does is they have those abstract objectives, but when they communicate, they translate them into more visualizable language. Now, if that ironically all sounds very abstract, I'll give you an example. It's another Apple example. I promise you I'm not obsessed with the iPod, but I think it proves the point. So think back to when the iPod launched. Lots of other brands were out there, and those other brands wanted to convey the benefit of memory and storage. And most of them behaved like this. So look at the top, the very top of the ad. If you can't quite see it at the back, it says 256 megabytes. Now that's problematic because the audience can't picture a megabyte. They cannot visualize 256. It's completely forgettable. Now, by the end of the day, I doubt many of you will remember that ad. But think about what iPod did. Exactly the same challenge of memory and storage, but they used language people could picture. They talked about 1,000 songs in your pocket. And because you can visualize a pocket, it makes it much stickier. So the argument here is whatever you're trying to communicate, whether it's in a copywriting in an ad, in a pitch deck, in a meeting, in a presentation, make sure you use the language that's visualizable. And I know it's very easy to take Apple examples and pretend they're kind of representative. But it's not just Apple that use this technique. Now, think about Red Bull. Lesser marketers than Red Bull would have said, Red Bull gives you energy. But again, it would have been too abstract to be remembered. But they talk about Red Bull gives you wings. And you can imagine someone flying, you can picture their flapping wings. And that's what makes it such a powerful strapline. Because it's visualizable, it's much, much stickier. Now that is one study from behavioral science. The amazing thing is there are tens of thousands of these studies. Whatever category you work in, whatever challenge you have, there will be a study out there that can help you. Now I began this morning by saying sometimes that variety of studies can be a bit confusing. So I think it's really important to use a framework to make the field very practical and very easy to use. And this morning I picked the principle of make it social to discuss. But I want to go back to the EAST framework and pick another of the principles. So the E of the framework is make it easy. And this draws a lot on the work of this man. Does anyone recognize the man on the screen? Okay. If you don't recognize him, this is Daniel Kahneman. He won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2002. And he's probably the most illustrious behavioral scientist of the last 25 years. He died last March at the age of 90. And he had a very, very long career. So he started doing experiments in his 20s. And about 18 months before he died, he did one of his final interviews. And the journalist put him on the spot. The journalist said, Mr. Kahneman, you've run hundreds of experiments. What's the single biggest learning that you've found? Kahneman didn't miss a beat. He said, that's simple, 3 words, make it easy. According to Kahneman, if you boil things down to their fundamentals, if you want to change behavior of other people, there are just 2 ways to do it. You can motivate them to want to change, but Kahneman's insight is we overestimate the impact of motivation and appeal. The other way you can change behavior is to make it easier. Now, Kahneman isn't just stating the obvious. He's not just saying, make it easier and the behavior happens more. No, that's a statement of the obvious. He's going a step further. He's saying people categorically and repeatedly underestimate the impact of removing tiny little barriers. So his argument is most businesses misallocate resources. Most businesses put too much money into motivating their customer, making their product look fantastic and appealing, not enough time, energy, or money in making it easier to buy. Of course, great that Kahneman makes this argument, but no one is believed on their authority alone. And there's plenty of experimental evidence to support this idea. So the next study I want to take you through is a 2017 study from Bergman and Rogers, 2 American psychologists. And they worked with the Department of Education to look at the importance of making things easy. The Department of Education had created a new service, so you as a parent could sign up, and then each day you'd be texted advice on how to encourage your kids to work harder. Pilot study did it brilliantly, really positive effects on kids' grades. So they roll this out on a broader scale. But the psychologists persuaded the department to launch it in one of 3 separate ways. So they got a database of hundreds of thousands of parents. and a third of them were texted the standard message. So they were told about why the service was amazing, and then at the bottom of that text message, there was a web link, and if people clicked it, it took them to a form, and it took about 12 seconds to fill in with name and address and such like. Now, in that setup, 1% of people enrolled, 1%. Next group of randomly selected parents, they got the same base text message, so the same reasons to believe, the same strengths of the service were told to them. But this time at the bottom of the text message, there was no web link to click on. It just said, if you want to enroll, text back the word start. And when they did that, there was an 8-fold increase in sign-up rates. We're up to 8% now. Final group of parents, they send the same basic text message, but at the bottom, and I should stress this is all pre-GDPR, they say you are enrolled if you don't want to be, text back the word stop. And there you get 95% of people joining the scheme. So just as Kahneman argues, you remove a little bit of friction and you have this outsized impact. You've got a 95 percentage point change in behaviour. But that's just the first part of the study. The clever bit comes next. They then went out and got experts in education, like teachers and policymakers and head teachers. They told those experts about the 3 different scenarios, and they asked the experts to predict what they thought the sign-up rates would be. Now, the experts aren't stupid. They knew that these barriers would put people off, so they got the direction of change right, but they were wildly wrong in terms of the scale of the impact. So they thought 39% of people would sign up in that standard group, 46 in the simplified, 66 in the auto-enrollment. So the experts thought you remove friction and you boost that initial sign-up by 27 percentage points. But remember, in reality, there was a 96 percentage point change. The core argument from this study, and there are plenty of others like it, is that people repeatedly underestimate the impact of little bits of friction. And what that means is that most organisations misallocate resources. They put too much into appeal, too little time, money or effort into making their product as easy to access as possible. So go through that customer journey, identify even the most trivial bits of friction, and if you remove them, they'll tend to have an outsized effect. So plenty of ways to apply this. It could be in your communications, talking about how easy you are, but really the best thing to do is change the actual user experience, getting the product to people quicker. Removing clicks on the customer journey. Think how hard Amazon fought to legally protect that one-click purchasing opportunity. It could be moving people from having to go to store each week to getting them onto subscription. It could be pre-populating forms. These are small changes that we ignore at our peril because we think customers will be motivated enough to push through the barriers. But remember that educational experiment. I think what those parents thought in the second condition or the third condition, the first condition, was, of course they wanted to help their kids. But they thought to themselves, well, I'm a bit busy now, I'll come back and do it tomorrow. And of course, tomorrow never comes around. So removing friction has this disproportionate effect. I think of all the examples out there of the power of removing friction, Netflix is still probably the greatest example. Now, this is a company that spends $25 billion a year on content. But one of the best things they've done to increase viewership is to make it easier. It used to be, you sit down, you watch your box set, the episode ends, you had to go and find the remote control. Now, of course, it auto-plays. And now, when your episode ends, you have to find the remote control not to watch the next program. That is a ridiculously small change in the amount of effort required, 2 seconds maybe. But even in the context of £25 billion of content spend, it has a huge effect on viewership. Now, if that's the kind of main principle of Make It Easy, there's a little bit of a twist that I thought might be worth talking about, because I think it's particularly relevant to you. And it's the argument that just because customers want things to be easy for them, It doesn't mean they want things to have been easy for you. And this is what's known as the illusion of effort. So I'm going to turn to a slightly different study now. It's from a brilliant academic called Andrea Morales, and she ran this study in 2005. So she recruits a group of Americans who are in market to buy a house. And every one of the participants is given the same list of houses, and they all meet their requirements. But half the participants are told that the real estate agent took 1 hour to generate the list using a computer. Now, when that group rate the quality of the estate agent on a scale of 0 to 100, the average rating is 50. The other half of the participants, they see exactly the same list of houses, but they are told the real estate agent took 9 hours to generate the list, and they did it manually. And there, you see the average rating jumping to 68 out of 100, a 36% improvement. Now think about that for a second. Everyone is seeing exactly the same service, but their ratings of that service vary wildly according to the impression of effort. Morales' argument is judging the quality of a service is complicated. And when people face complex questions, often without even knowing it, they replace the complex question with a simpler one. And the simpler question, in this case, is how much effort did the estate agent, the real estate agent, go to? People use effort as a proxy for quality. So the argument from Morales is you need to be more transparent about the efforts that you're going to in your business. Don't assume that the audience will see them unless you tell them about it. You know, you've got to be transparent about efforts. You've got to let people know. You've got to make them salient. Now, again, if that all sounds a little bit vague, I'll give you a couple of examples. So my favorite example is probably Dyson. Now, this is an amazing category. They created the category of luxury vacuums and got people paying hundreds upon hundreds of US dollars to buy these things. And what is the consistent feature of their marketing? Now, if you look on their website, if you look at their ads, in fact, if you pick up James Dyson, the inventor's biography, the very first words of his autobiography are that he went through 5,127 prototypes to get to the bagless vacuum. Now, of course, logically, it shouldn't matter how many prototypes he went through. As a consumer, you should just judge the quality on how well it picks up dirt, how beautiful it looks. But the illusion of effort suggests that might be how people should behave, but it's not how they actually behave. We use effort as a proxy for quality. So emphasizing the prototypes makes that same vacuum appear a higher quality and more desirable. Now that principle that Dyson use in copywriting, they take it all the way through the design of the product. Now picture the Dyson in your mind. Now, it's got that transparent case. You can literally see the work going on. Even subtle cues like that will make people appreciate the product more. There's a fantastic pair of researchers at Harvard called Buell and Norton, Ryan Buell and Michael Norton, and they've shown in restaurants, diners who can see into the kitchen will rate the same dish better by about an order of 13 or 14% better than people who can't see into the kitchen. Now, obviously, everyone knows there are chefs at work, but making their labour obvious and visible makes people appreciate the product more. Coming back to the world of digital, Buell and Norton have also done work with websites, comparison sites. And they've shown if you slow down the delivery of data. So if you're on a travel comparison site and you're searching for a holiday, if you get the results immediately, people tend to think it's a not a very comprehensive, not high quality service. So Buell and Norton tested slowing the delivery of the results down by 2 seconds. And whilst that was happening, just telling people this little bar, it went round and round saying searching Emirates, searching Etihad, searching British Airways. And by doing that, they increased people's rating of comprehensiveness of the results by 15%. So try and think, how can you make the efforts that you go to as visible as possible? Because if you don't do that, you're not doing your services justice. Now, there's one final twist on this experiment that I wanted to talk you through, and it's around AI. Obviously, there's not as much research by psychologists and behavioural scientists on AI because it's a more recent topic. But the initial work that's been done suggests you should be very careful about speeding up services for clients. So there's a lovely study from a Dutch psychologist called Kobe Millet, and he's based at a big Amsterdam university called VRU. And in 2023, he recruited a group of participants and he showed them posters. And the twist in the experiment is sometimes the poster was labelled as hand-drawn, sometimes it was labelled as AI generated. Now, when he asked people about their purchase intent, he got them to rate that on a 7-point scale. If people thought the product was AI generated, the average score was 3.02. But if people thought the poster was hand-drawn, that rating went up 61%, and their purchase intent went up to 4.85. Now remember, again, everyone is seeing exactly the same product. The only thing that's changing is this story of AI versus hand-drawn. And Millet's explanation for this is that it's a factor of the illusion of effort. People assume that AI is low effort. So if you speed up your services and deliver something much, much quicker, let's say you're a professional service provider and it used to take you, 2 days to do a competitive audit, and now you can do it in 2 hours. Even if you are delivering on an objective level, exactly the same quality of work, your client will rate it worse. So what you need to do is draw their attention, not to the length of time it took to produce that specific bit of work, but make sure you're telling them about all the efforts you've gone to get to the situation in which you can create that work quickly. How many years of experience the team have, how many prototypes they've gone through, how many protocols they've put together. Now, there's this very famous story of Paula Scher. Have people heard of the graphic designer Paula Scher? She's at an agency called Pentagram. And about 20 years ago, her agency was hired by Citigroup. So they'd just merged together and they wanted a new logo. Now, literally, in the briefing meeting for the design, Paula Scher sketched out their famous umbrella logo. Now, the client was flabbergasted at this because later on Pentagram asked them to pay £1.5 million for a logo she took 34 seconds to draw. But her answer was, it's taken me 20 years to draw it in 34 seconds. So if you have to produce something quickly, make sure you're referring people back to the efforts and experience that have made that speedy situation possible. Because if you don't do it, you'll fall victim of the illusion of effort, and great work that you're putting in front of people will not be appreciated as much as it should. So that was the second principle. We talked about make it social this morning. I talked about make it easy just now. And literally, there are tens of thousands of these experiments. Now, we could spend days upon days running through them, and there would still be more to talk about. So hopefully, if I've done anything at all, like one of the studies that I've discussed has shown you this field can be useful, it can be practical, it can improve effectiveness. And hopefully, I've left you wanting to find out more, because I strongly believe if you draw on behavioural science when you're creating campaigns, when you're trying to persuade and influence, you're working with human nature, and that will always, always be more effective. Thank you very much for your time.